We're back with another edition of the Vandy Program, and we are going to talk about the news of the day with my good friend Andrew Donaldson, who has done this before. I've had him on the pod before, and we've also talked about the news of the day. And I was joking that my show notes are scribbled. So this is the kind of stuff that, and we also can white balance while we're showing the show notes. Yeah, exactly. So Andrew, good morning. How are you?
Morning. It's all good. Look, you talk about scribbled show notes. I was doing radio last week, and I was hosting the earlier show, and I was a guest on the show that followed it, but the enterprise server for the internet went out. So to get on the second show, I had to leave the state-of-the-art studio, go upstairs to a regular office cubicle, and zoom into the radio station that I was sitting in to get on the air because just stuff happens. So don't feel bad about handwritten notes, man. You just make it work however you've done broadcasting long enough. Screwy stuff happens. So handwritten notes, nothing wrong with that, buddy.
Yeah, it's from the Tim Gunn School. Make it work.
Make it work. As long as it gets on there.
Designers. Okay, I guess item one that we wanted to talk about is this supposed Iran deal that is just breaking. I had Sky News on earlier, and it said the draft of the Iran deal has been shared with the Iranians by the Americans. And I guess, and that may not be totally accurate, but as we try to parse out what's going on, I guess I would ask a military veteran who served over in that part of the universe, what really is going on?
So we've both done enough contracts to know that a memorandum of understanding, which is the terminology being used for this particular set of facts, that's not a contract. That's a pre-contract that means absolutely nothing unless you actually get a contract. So let's make sure we frame that properly. This is when the people involved are calling it a memo of understanding. That's telling. What's in here, and then I'll talk about the military part of it in a second. Here's where we're at on this. They're trying to reopen the strait to pre-war levels within 30 days. They're talking about, the Lebanon situation, Hezbollah and Israel. That's not really dealt with. The overarching nuclear stuff, which is both the cause that the Trump administration has shifted to since regime change wasn't working. That is not expressly dealt with. It's something that's going to be negotiated later, and we've also seen enough contracts in military and negotiated things to know that that doesn't really mean anything either. So if all of this, to get to the military part, if all of this is just to return to the status quo of where we were when we started, now we have to talk about, was that worth 13 American lives, 300 American casualties of various descriptions, billions of dollars directly spent on the conflict itself, and hundreds of billions, if not more, in economic impact, both in the U.S. and worldwide? What did we really gain if we're just doing a memorandum of understanding to get back to the status quo, which, by the way, is probably going to be untenable and mean more conflict down the line? That's the question. Again, we'll see what's actually in the signed document if we ever get to a signed document. But as early as yesterday, we still had some shooting going on. So from the military perspective, it is, we've spent lives, we've spent a lot of money, and we once again have a war that we started without a good plan to get out of. And here we are trying to figure out how to get out of it. And it sure looks like we're going to get out of this thing starting pretty much where we were when we got into it. That's pretty disheartening on the scale of, yeah, I've done this Middle East thing a time or two, and we seem to be repeating a pattern here.
So I'll use I guess let's call it the Fox News argument. And the Fox News argument would be, but we cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon. Are they any farther away from developing a nuclear weapon than they were when this thing started?
So here we go with this, because I'll be 46 on Friday as we're recording this on Wednesday. And I've heard that all my life. There's two parts of that. It's absolutely true. You cannot let Iran get a nuclear weapon because they'll actually use it. They've said they'll use it. We're going to nuke Israel the second we get a nuclear weapon. That's true. The debate is how far away from it are. And the meta level of this thing is that, look, they cannot develop one on their own. We know this. Russia and China, to a lesser extent, give them just enough of this stuff to keep them on the leash as a proxy, because Russia and China likes them being a thorn in our side. but they only give them enough because they don't really want them getting one either because they don't trust them either. So how close are they really to ever getting it is an open point of debate. To, any close is too close, in my opinion, so I understand that. But remember, Trump did the strikes last year on it that we quote unquote obliterated their potential ever. And now it's, well, we got to do it again. You see this recurring pattern. There's also this thing very much where anytime you want to do anything with Iran, you just go to the nuclear thing, whether no matter how true it is, no matter how close they are. Do they have some, enriched uranium that is somewhere under a mountain that's going to be really hard to get to no matter what you want to do? That's true. Is there ever going to be any way to get that unless they voluntarily give it up, which they're never going to do no matter what you negotiate? They ain't going to give that up. Too much of a source of national pride. No, could you do some operation where we spend a whole bunch of lives getting it out of there? Yeah, maybe potentially. Is that probably worth it? No. So again, we come back to, are we going to wind up exactly where we were before we started this in a lot of ways? And the nuclear weapon piece is one of it because it's not only true, it's also a useful geopolitical tool for everybody involved to get what they want anytime they need to deal with Iran. So I am highly skeptical that the nuclear piece of this is going to be doing. Again, just to reiterate, Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. Are we trapped in this cycle of how close are they? Let's do something. This is the reason we're doing it. Oh, we didn't really accomplish anything. Is that the cycle we're trapped in because of that truth? Yes.
Um, you you also mentioned that the regime change thing isn't working or wasn't working, which is why there was a shift in plans or a perceived shift in plans. So that's my other big question, aside from the nuclear part of all this, is whether or not this thing gets signed by the son of the Ayatollah or whomever is purportedly in charge. And 30, 60, 90 days go by, and the new government reveals itself, and it's the end of won't be fooled again, and we're just back to where we are.
Yeah, so the way it's been in Iran for a while, because even before we killed the Ayatollah and the rest of a lot of the command structure, the IRGC runs the country, and especially there was reports about, his physical and mental capacity before we killed him anyway. The IRGC runs the country, and then they're the spiritual figurehead that allows the regime to have more than just a dictatorship. Now it's a spiritual mandate, blah, blah, blah. We know all this for, 47 years, whatever it's been since the revolution. If the president, to go back to what you're calling the Fox argument, which is mostly the president's argument, although that evolved, the president had a strong argument of we're going to take him out and then we're going to do business with whoever's left. I have issues with it, but that's an argument. That's a strategy, and we did it. We took him out, or more specifically, the Israeli intelligence took him out, and they got a lot of the command structure. So then you can go, okay, we've diminished their capacity, we've taken out their leadership. We're going to wait and see what happens now. Now the Iranians have a choice to make. Except that's not what we did. And now the IRGC is emboldened because they pulled the lever on the one thing they have, closing the Strait of Hormuz. And when this is all said and done, they're still going to have that lever in the future to once again close the Strait of Hormuz. We've knocked out a lot of their military. That is true. We've knocked out a lot of their command and control structure. We've also seen how that command and control structure was already built to be independently verifiable, to their detriment, by the way, because all of a sudden you had other countries catching strays that the Iranians probably didn't want catching strays because they couldn't control some of the fire, in Turkey and some other places got fire that they probably wish they hadn't, but seems like that didn't go too far. This is something going forward that the regime that is left is now emboldened. The problem with regime change is the old wire line, right? If you come at the king, you best not miss. Well, if you're going to do regime change, you got to change the regime. And we have a lot of history that changing the regime without getting involved in the ground means the regime doesn't even change. So even the success of like the Maduro raid down south, you took out the figurehead and we got him and he's sitting in jail. And that's a good thing because he's a despicable human being and I'm all for it. The bad part of that is did you really do anything to help the country? Because it's just next dictator up in the exact same regime. And that sure looks like what's happened in Iran. So if you took out the Ayatollah, said, okay, this was a decapitation strike against a guy who's a horrible, evil human being, and now we'll see what happens. That would have been a good exit ramp to take. I think we talked about that the last time I saw you. Would have had a lot more support than what we're doing now would have had. But now here we are kind of in a quagmire running around in a circle. Thank God there's no troops on the ground, but it's still a quagmire of, okay, how do we get out of this without just returning to the status quo? Because again, these negotiations look like a return to the status quo. If you return to the status quo, really hard to spin that as a win.
So let's turn this a little bit domestically because I want to talk about Paxton versus Talarico.
Yeah.
But I think one of the things that's going to drive the midterms is, of course, 100% related to what's going on in Iran, and that's gas prices. So you have the two, and some of this is bolstered by the Trump argument of, okay, it's supposed to be worth it to pay $5 a gallon for gas. At least that's what we're paying around here, suburban Chicago. They pay $5 a gallon for gas, and in exchange, Iran doesn't get a nuclear weapon. However, we get a deal, 30, 60, 90 days go by, it's the fall, we're looking at an economy that is still stagnant. It's probably a good description of it. Maybe gas prices come down, maybe they don't, but is it gonna be too late for the midterm message to be that this was worth it, you paid a little bit more, maybe some economic turbulence along the way, but you're better off with Republicans versus Democrats?
Yeah, the American people have a long history of they don't care what the reason is. They don't want to pay high gas prices and high prices for anything for any reason whatsoever. And if you give them that, it better be short and you better have a timeline and you better tell them the timeline and you better meet that timeline. Ask Joe Biden how that works out. That's how we got President Trump part two. Prices got too high. He didn't have a good answer for it. And the other problem the president has is there's a whole lot of tape of him talking about how low the gas prices are when they're not. That's not going to look good. Does it hurt him particularly? No. Does that get run in a lot of these House races and Senate races and the local legislative races? Oh, yeah. That's going to happen. So that's a problem for the president. The other thing to remember here is gas prices is one of those really weird economic things. What you see at the pump and what you see in the oil prices on the stock market on CNBC, they're related, but not really. The oil prices change based on projections. The pump price at the pump is factored into a lot of things. You have all the state taxes factored in. You have the federal highway taxes figured in, so everybody pays a little differently. But that's also a trailing indicator. So while the oil prices is kind of a projection of what they think is going to happen, and that's why you have the president and his team coming out and saying things on Monday morning when the market opens to try to drive that price down a little bit. The trailing indicator is the prices at the pump. It's going to take a while. Remember, even once they open the Strait of Hormuz, it's going to take a while because they have to idle down and match the refinery production to match the storage capability for not being able to put out all that oil. Now, the Saudis especially, they have the East-West pipeline. That's about 7, 8, 9 million barrels, something in that range that they can run, but that's a fraction of the 20 million that's going through the Strait. So things like that, there's a math problem here and there's a logistics, and I've got a logistics background, so you understand this. It's going to take them a while to switch from we basically shut everything down because we don't know what's going on to ramping it back up. Because even once they ramp it back up, remember the first thing they got to do is they got to do that first surge of all the stuff that's been stored. Then they got to refill the storage. Then you get back, normal production is step 4, 5, and 6. It's not step 1 or 2. It's going to take a little while. And the other part of this is a lot of the effects of the Iran war are just now starting to hit Asia, which means it hasn't hit us yet because the price increases in Asia gets on ships and comes to us. That takes another 40, 50 days depending on the shipping rates. That stuff's just now starting to hit the thing. So you have what we call bullwhip effects. Just like a bullwhip, it's got to go up to snap down. That's what's going to happen. It's going to go up, it's going to come down, it's going to snap up, it's going to go down, and then it'll level out. And that's going to take a while. And the problem is if you sign an agreement in the next couple of days, assuming it holds, now you're talking about July, August before the effects of that agreement start hitting. Well, what's that? Well, that's primetime campaign season. So you can see the problem, and one of the reasons the administration is really trying to get this deal in place. Plus, you have tremendous pressure from Europe, who needs to deal with this in a different way. We're already going to have a famine in Africa again this summer because of the fertilizer that went through the strait, which people aren't really talking about. Southeast Asia is going to have massive economic issues. This thing's going to linger and it's going to show up. And people, the American people don't care about high prices other than I'm paying too much and I'm going to blame whoever's in charge. The president always gets more blame and more credit for the economy than he should get. In this particular instance, he's going to get all the blame and he's going to get all the credit. So if he doesn't get something to get it down where he can go to the voters with these midterms and go, I get credit for fixing this, even though it's a problem he created, but that's the Trump brand and he's the master of that. If he gets all the blame, he's going to have to own it this time and there's not going to be anywhere to hide from it.
So that brings us to domestic stuff. So item 2 on my list is Paxton versus Talarico. So let me set the stage for the blips that will be making the rounds on the internet.
Boy, this is going to be ugly.
Ken Paxton was anointed by Trump, got the imprimatur from Pope Trump a couple of weeks back, and that ends up being the thing that got him through this primary runoff. So Ken Paxton, flawed character that he is, will be running against James Talarico, who I guess can best be called I've called him someone who is LARPing as a Christian, which is a whole other issue. But he is kind of Beto light in a couple of and I'm showing my bias here, but he seems to be kind of a weaker looking and weaker acting version of James Talarico. So to your point, it's going to be ugly, but looking at your crystal ball, let me know how you think this shapes up the next few months.
So the dynamic that got us here was Trump holding his endorsement, which is really interesting because there was no doubt that Cornyn was going to lose. Everybody knew he was going to lose. He knew he was going to lose. He acted like he was going to lose. The Republican GOP establishment spent something like $100 million on this race. And Paxton won by 25 points, which is a shocking number when you look at the spread before. That was the runoff number. The spread on the original number was, single digits. This is one of those things where I'm supposed to do the talking head thing, but I just make it personal and go, my God, what I'm going to have to do when I cover this race for the next, however many months it is between now and November. This is going to be ugly on a scale that we have never seen in American politics. And I understand the full weight of what I'm saying when I mean that there's been this is going to be some of the ugliest because this is going to be a hundreds of millions of dollars Senate race, if not, God knows how much money they're going to spend on this thing. And the only thing you can do, because Ken Paxton is such a corrupt, degenerate human being, is it's going to have to go personal against Talarico, who has, plenty of friendly fire to get to. They posted I put out a thing this morning. They did a post of the Democratic Party put it out, the National Party, not the Texas Party. Ready to run, and he's standing in front of a wall that's a Texas flag, and he's wearing his boots and his shirt, and he's got this really weird pose he's standing in. And I put out, I was like, this is just a badly composed photograph, media-wise. And it's cringy because it screams try hard. And try hard is a really bad thing, and it goes to some of the, legitimate and otherwise criticism of the man. It's a try hard. And he has a very legitimate chance of making a race of this when it shouldn't be, because Ken Paxton's such a flawed candidate with so much corruption and so much bad will. And the fact that you now have people internally to the GOP that are going to really question whether they can support him no matter who the Democrat is. The only way this race can go, and the only way those hundreds of million dollars is going to go, is to call Talarico every name in the book, fair or unfairly. They're going to paint him. They already had, I'm not going to name him because I thought it was just despicable comments, but a named GOP political figure today. They're going with the Tyler Frico, and they're going to bring up all the culture stuff, and they're going to bring up his comments about trans people. They're going to bring up the fact that he's unmarried and has a mystery girlfriend and the implications thereof of all that. They're going to bring up whether or not he's a vegan. it's all personal all the time because when you got Paxton on the other side of it, there's nothing else you can do. Like you can't you can't really pump him up as this great thing other than he's for Trump and Trump endorsed him. So I don't know that we've ever seen a race with this much ugly coming that's got that much money behind it. And the problem with money, I'm writing a piece for West Virginia politics because they just had a very expensive primary that didn't have any statewide races on it. It was all legislatures and state senate. And that thing got up to $5 million, which compared to the Talarico race is nothing, but $5 million for a handful of delegates and like that's shocking amount of money. Like what's going on? And part of what I'm talking about there, and this is going to be on the national level times 100, is the perpetual campaign era means you have a perpetual money cycle. The money has to get spent so that you can fundraise more money. That money's got to go somewhere. And in this race, they're going to be able to pump a lot of money into this race to do a lot of really ugly, nasty stuff to both candidates. And I dread covering it. And we're going to have to cover it because it's an important seat. And it's been the fever dream of Team Blue for years to flip Texas back. Remember, in my lifetime, Texas was a pretty blue state. You know, it wasn't that long ago. The 70s and 80s is when it started to change. In the 90s, it flipped over. So, you know, this is going to be ugly and we have to cover it. And it's an important race. And Paxton's probably still, even with all that, Paxton's probably still the favorite to win. I think the Beto O'Rourke is probably a pretty good comp, except as bad a candidate as Ted Cruz can be on certain things, he's a lot stronger candidate than Paxton is. But now I think Talarico's probably a little weaker than what Beto was back then. So you still got to say Paxton's the favorite, but my God, is this going to be the absolute worst of all worlds as far as money and personal vitriol and who's a real what, to go to your earlier point. It's just, that's all this race is going to be. It's not going to be policy. It's not going to be politics as we understand it. It's just going to be the absolute worst of gutter internet. And it's because of the people that got nominated to run for it. And frankly, I hate it. I detest it. And I've got a lot of anger to Texas GOP voters right now that we all got to deal with it, frankly.
And the money thing is really, to me, that one of the challenges with the whole money in politics question is, and I don't think this is a new concept to bring up, but you have in some respects a dying local media,
Mm-hmm.
and there's the need to stay afloat by accepting all sorts of political advertising,
Oh, yeah.
and that becomes a challenge. Now I'm in Illinois, where it's we have two non-races. One is for governor. It's not going to be close. Anybody who thinks that Darren Bailey has a chance is smoking something, which is legal in this state, by the way, and it does impact what you smell when you go downtown Chicago. Um, and then downstate, or the statewide, the Senate to replace Dick Durbin as the what would become the junior senator. It's Juliana Stratton, who is the lieutenant governor of Illinois right now, and she's the one who had the F Trump ad, and that was interesting. But also, I can't tell you who the opposition is. But I mention all that because there's still going to be a boatload of money spent on this just to protect the turf, and it's alarming how much money will continue to be thrown at these things in what you call correctly a perpetual election cycle.
Yeah. And the thing about it is places like West Virginia. So Chicago, I remember years ago when I first started doing media, I was on, I think it was 560 The Answer in Chicago, one of the shows. And I remember talking about this very thing, and they're like, well, the Chicago market you don't notice the political advertising so much because it's so loud and so, it's one of the major media markets in the whole world. You have all the sports and all it all kind of balances out. When you go to places like West Virginia or the highlands of Texas, the high country of Texas or the South or, middle America, poor Iowa every 4 years, what we do to them poor people. Look what's going on in Maine right now with Plattner and Collins and all that. Those places aren't built for the national money that's going into them. They're just not. So like when I do a radio hit in West Virginia the last couple of weeks, I dreaded being on the studio line because you can hear the feed. It's every commercial was politics, and a lot of them repetitive because it's the same ad buys from the same big companies. So when I did Chicago radio years ago, you're hearing like, well, this will all balance out. We're not that worried about it. There's a lot, and I've got a piece that's out for publication. It's not out just yet, but I just did the line editing with my editor this morning on it. Is rural America is they're not getting campaign ads. They're getting assaulted by campaign media because local media, this is so important to talk about because you don't just understand, you got to understand how the system works to get you your politics. Mailers are getting to be an issue in my home state because people are sick of them. There's literally more money going into these places than they can spend. There's not enough ad blocks in the day for the money that's coming in. So they're doing all these mailers, and your mailbox is full of mail. All your radio stations are covered into all the TV commercials on local TV. They're getting to where people will not listen and or watch local media during campaigns because they just can't get away from it. You can't get away from it in the mailbox, can't get away from it on radio, can't get away from a podcast stream. It's hilarious. I'm in North Carolina right now, but the ads on my iHeartRadio app are all from my hometown because I was in my hometown all last week. So I'm getting, not to do a free plug, but Mid-State Chevrolet and LaRose Ford, which is in my hometown, no matter while I'm driving 5-6 hours away, because it picks up where I just was. We now have a media ecosystem and the algorithms that are chasing people with campaign stuff, whether they want it or not. And then we turn around and wonder, like, why in the world did that West Virginia primary have a 21% turnout rate when it had record spending? And the number that's blowing everybody away, and I just got done writing about this, was registrations were up 9%. And we had record spending, but the voter turnout was down. That don't compute unless you just take the politics out of it and go, maybe we've just completely burned out you're an old media guy. You can burn an audience out. There's other examples. Sports gambling ads are burning the audience out. This is something that's been going on for about a year and a half. I was talking to a buddy of mine that does sports radio in the Chicago area, actually, and we were talking about when this first started happening. I was like, man, all these sports gambling ads are going to kill our business. Everybody's getting the money right now, but it's killing your ad business. How are you going to ever have an ad business because the DraftKings and all the rest of them, they flooded the market with so much money that all you hear on sports radio now is gambling ads, and it's gambling. You've just burned out the market. You're never going to be able to have an advertising market that can match that ever again. So right now it's great, but long term it's burning you out. I think in politics you're having the same problem. And to really widen this out, my kids are all adults now, 18 to 28. That generation hates advertisements. They get offended when they see a commercial. They get offended when Netflix interrupts their program. Or Amazon or whatever. I don't think Netflix does it as bad, but Disney Plus now started sticking ads back in. Peacock started. My daughter got real mad. She's like, "Why? We used to watch Downton Abbey and there was no ads. Why are there ads now?" Well, because that offends them. So now put those three things together. Your cultural stuff like sports is getting blitzed to death with advertising people do not want. It's effective, but the wider audience doesn't want it. The political world and the news and information world is getting blitzed with political advertising that people do not want. Their mailboxes are full of junk mail advertising that they do not want. And they can't even listen to a podcast or listen to iTunes or listen to their streaming music without the algorithm chasing their preferences and giving them stuff from wherever they're at that moment, not just what they're looking for. And by the way, the Google algorithm just changed to AI, so now it's going to be more personalized, which I hate. I don't want personalized Google. I want wide spectrum Google. it's driving me nuts because it's literally changing how I do everything. I can't just Google things anymore because it's like, here's where you buy this 10 miles from you. And I'm like, no, I'm trying to write a piece about Germany. This doesn't help me. All those things are combining, and I think you're going to start seeing it in the political blowback of, okay, we're just overloaded with information. We don't like any of these people, and that's why the fastest growing demographic in politics right now is not a traditional demographic of race or cultural status or economic strata or religion or any of the traditional markers. It's the double haters who are sick of all of it. That's the fastest growing demographic in voting. And it encapsulates all those things. So when you see something like the Corin Talarico race, you think that's going to make more Republicans and more Democrats or more double haters? I think it's going to make a lot of double haters who, no matter what they believe, just go, this is gross what these men are saying about each other and what's on my TV. I think you're going to create more double haters, and that's the environment. And I know that's a really long answer, but all those things have to go together for us to understand the political and media environment we are, because the media adapts to the political and the political feeds the media, and it's this symbiotic organism of giving a very small percentage of people what they want because that's what monetizes it, but it's alienating a whole lot of other people at the same time. And that's the part that we're not doing a lot of talking about that we probably should be.
How does it change, or is it, let me take a step back. You talked about the gambling ads and the proliferation of gambling, which is a whole other, we can talk about that till blue in the face, but there's evidence of the fatigue at Wrigley Field because they took the Captain Morgan Club, which was adjacent to Wrigley, cool place to have a drink before the game, hang out after the game, and they turned it into the DraftKings Sportsbook. And that lasted all of maybe not even a year. It was not very long that it lasted. I may have my dates wrong.
No,
but
I remember. Yeah.
I think
And it was loud.
Yeah, and we've got a situation now where it's okay, and I get it. I understand that gambling is now everywhere, and it's also driving how people watch sports
Yep.
in ways that I mean, I'm not a big fan of parlays about whether or not somebody's going to hit 3 home runs. But I guess without everybody just throwing their hands up in the air, getting tired of it, and moving on to something else, how does this all change?
Well, it's changing society because this is kind of the end game of what happens when we've been talking for years about how social media has siloed society. You now have a la carte news. You can literally this is a line in that piece I just wrote that I keep promoting that I can't even give you a link to because it's not out yet. Sorry guys, that's bad business. But I was just writing about this. Is you have it used to be it was an idiom that people only hear what they want to hear. Now it's the business model, and it's the driving dictate of all of politics is people only hear what they want to hear. So the thing like gambling, and by the way, I support legalizing gambling. You got to get that stuff out of the back alleys. So for all the bad of it, I'm not one of these purist prohibition people like ban all illegal. You can't ban gambling. There's ever since there was 3 Neanderthals around the fire, somebody gambled on a stick. It's always going to be there. Legalize it, regulate it, keep it in the sunshine for all the good, bad, or indifferent. I think we need to do something about what a lot of countries have done, and I think we need to regulate the advertising. I think the in-game gambling is something that needs to be regulated because that's just fraught for bad stuff. Like you can't bet once the horse race starts. You shouldn't be betting on a game once the game starts, but that's another rant for another day. But people have siloed themselves with social media, and the news and information media and the content creator economy evolved to feed that siloing. So you're only feeding your most hardcore audience because that's the one that'll pay you a subscription or pay you in clicks or buy your advertising or whatever. Whereas the old talk radio model was you have broad advertising for a broad audience. The subscription model is you have a narrow focus to the hardcores, and that's who you focus your business model in. But you're seeing that in sports, you're seeing it in politics, you're seeing it in media, you're seeing it in everything now. So that siloing effect, we do a bad job of connecting the dots. The siloing effect that some folks use for social media to make themselves their own little communities of sameness, now that's being monetized. Well, the problem with the sameness and the problem with having a niche thing is when you go to Wrigley Field, which is full of a whole bunch of different niche people, but they all have the Cubs involved. Now all of a sudden one person puts their niche out there and everybody else is like, what are you doing, you weirdos? That's not yours, that's ours collectively. And it wasn't quite as bad as when they took the Roberto Clemente banner down at the Pirates Stadium. You want to talk about almost having a riot and burning the bridges? That almost happened. But it's a good example of all those people that with disparaging interests, but they have the Cubs in common. Something that usually brings a city together, unless you're a White Sox fan and the Pope. That's a joke. The Cubs fans all said, no, your little niche thing does not override our collective niche thing, which is love of this baseball team that's been beloved for 100 plus years, however long it's been. And no, you can't have that space because that's not your space, that's our space, right? That's just the encapsulation of it. Now, think about it instead of a baseball stadium, think about that as a political party or a political movement like the MAGA movement inside the Republican Party or like the progressives versus moderate fight inside the Democratic Party. Now you got the same problem, especially our Team Blue friends, where you have progressives kind of own the online space, but they can't win in the ballot box space as much as they do the online space. MAGA's kind of got the same problem right now. They've taken over all the media stuff, but I've got the data. A lot of people just checked out of the media if they don't believe that stuff. It's a captured market, but the market's smaller than it used to be. Those things all go together, and for us to understand politics today, you have to understand that dynamic going forward, and it all goes together.
In non-Texas and non-gambling related news, let's talk about California briefly because there's two really interesting things going on out there. One is the governor's race, which, again, I wish, and I'll admit I watch a decent amount of Fox News, and I do wish they were as blatantly obvious with this fact as some of the online folks have been and that I have been. And the fact is this: when it comes to the governor's race, unless it is Hilton against Bianco, Hilton will lose in the general.
Probably.
And I mean, to me, it's not probably. This is a Democratic stronghold, and it won't be. This is the Steve Garvey thing. Steve Garvey, a lot of people don't remember, was the candidate for Senate in the fall of 24. It was not close. It was not close. He made it through the jungle primary and then got destroyed in the general. So that's something that's weird, but also just your thoughts on, I guess, first of all, the governor's race, because it seems like it's a bunch of Team Blue jockeying for position to be the one to take out Steve Hilton in the fall.
It is amazing to me, although this is a great argument for why supermajorities are always bad and you're better off having a loyal opposition no matter what group you're in, because it keeps you straight and keeps you honest and you have to be on your toes all the time. What a pathetic slate of candidates for the fifth largest economy on the planet. And all due respect to the individual candidates who I'm sure are nice people and their families love them. That's the best, the state that produces some of the giants of politics, and the Reagans and the Nixons and the Jerry Browns, for whatever else you think about him. The guy was like this is what you have to offer at the statewide level. Like before you even get to this race, I'm just how do you have a state that's that rich, that powerful, that influential, and that's the political system that's churning out those kind of candidates? That's the best you got? Steve Hilton shouldn't be within 20 points of any Democrat the way the electorate's set up, but he is, because look at how can the Democratic Party be that all-powerful and not be able to produce any kind of a candidate? And then that's a self-answering question of, Well, it's been such a team. And by the way, this is one of the things that I think hurts. It's going to hurt Gavin Newsom. It hurt Kamala Harris. It hurts all the California candidates when they try to go national. To use the sports analogy, you become a system quarterback. You just got to get through the Democratic system. And then whereas candidates that are in other states where they have to work with Republicans or they have to fight with Republicans or usually have to do both, they're a lot more seasoned, honed, and they're better general candidates and more well-rounded candidates because they don't go through the crazy factory of the California Democratic Party. That's a weak candidate list. I don't just objectively, whatever else you think. How can you not have a better candidate than that? It's just mind blowing. I think you're right about the individual candidates. The California is just weird. It's so prosperous. It has so many economic advantages built into it. It has such a turnover with immigration coming in and migration coming in. And people talk about everybody moving to Texas, but look, that's not going to ever hurt California. Like Texas will get, but it's never going to really, they're not, you can't migrate enough people out of California to really hurt it, at least for the next 30, 40, 50 years, because there's so many economic advantages built into it. You have the weather, you have the splits, you have the it's on the West Coast. Like there's just stuff built into California that's going to keep it one of the more important states that we have, no matter what you do. But that also brings, atrophy inside of the political establishment when you have that supermajority where they don't really have to work very hard at it, and they're not punished when they don't succeed at things, and they don't really get held accountable. So whether it's the governor's race or the LA mayor's race, which is getting a lot of attention, the outcome is already pretty much determined unless you have something weird like a Schwarzenegger type thing happen, which was 3 or 4 things lined up just perfectly for it to happen. Frankly, I think by the end of it, you'd have to say it was probably a disappointing experiment. This is what it's always going to be. And it's so prosperous economically that you're just going to get away with it and people aren't going to really get punished. So I know the national media, and especially the more right-wing media, it bashes California and all the problems. But even with the high taxes and all the problems, it's an amazing place with a lot of advantages that nowhere else, not only in the country, nowhere else in the world has. So you're always going to have that influx of wealth because if you've got a lot of money and you're famous, you can still hide in LA. And you just can't hide anywhere else in the world like that. If you need to do certain things financially and in tech, you're still going to have to go to San Francisco, although that's starting to diversify out. And even as bad as they've tried to screw it up, it's still that way right now. So no matter the high house pricings in San Francisco or, some of the crime and development issues in LA, they're still going to be there. And it's just one of those amazing things that we probably ought to study of like, look how much affluence will buy you in political leniency, because that's really the story of California and the Democratic Party right now.
You mentioned LA, and my take on Spencer Pratt's candidacy, and I want to get your response to this. My take on it is it's a well-run campaign. They've made all of the right noise. It's really interesting. And he's got no shot in the general.
Yeah, I'm completely shocked that a guy that spent 20 plus years in media is really good at media. Who would have thought? I can't unsee his early stage because I'm just that age. I can't unsee that stuff. Does he care about his city? I'm sure he does. Is it a lot of performative even with that? Yeah, 2 things can be true at once. They're running an excellent social media campaign. They're not running anything like what they need on the ground to actually affect voters and win. He's going to be in 3rd place, if not 4th. It looks like Karen Bass is going to win again for some inexplicable reason, but again, all those things we just talked about, it's baked in the cake. Maybe somebody makes a run at her and consolidates, but he's going to come in probably 3rd or 4th. It's very, very loud because again, content is king, and a lot of those, let's go back to where we started with this. The perpetual campaign and perpetual money cycle has to go somewhere. So for political consultants and political purveyors of content on the internet, they got to have something for the next couple of months because, the Texas thing is what it is. Spencer Pratt is a name that will get drive clicks and you can dump a bunch of money in it and he will give you good content that is well made because he's a professional at this point in doing media. and he's got a message that hits, and he's got a story that lines up with the fires and all that. So that's a perfect place to put all that money. It doesn't mean he's going to win, because he's not, because politics still has some ground rules no matter how much money you throw at it. But that's a perfect example of what we started out talking about. You've got all this money, it's got more places to go. Let's put it on Pratt and see what happens. We know what's going to happen, but now it's going to be more entertaining, and now the Democrats have to spend more money, and so on and so forth. Same thing in Texas. The Paxton and Talarico is not expensive because of Paxton and Talarico. It's because all the money going on, it just becomes this escalating conflict of, we got to outspend the other person, and all this money has to filter down into the drain somewhere. Let's put it there. So, is it entertaining? Yeah. Is he going to lose? Oh, yeah. Is anything in LA going to measurably change? Unfortunately for the people in LA, probably not. Should it have after that fire? Absolutely. Heads should have rolled. The fact that it didn't tells you everything you need to know about where we're going forward.
But the Karen Bass argument is that she didn't understand the bureaucracy before, but now she wants another chance because she now understands the bureaucracy, and so she'll be able to get things done in a second term that she wasn't able to get done in a first term because she didn't know how the mayor's office worked.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do on Twitter is when a especially a senator or a Congress critter or a governor starts railing against the system, I'll just put on top of them how long they've been in. Like, Ted Cruz has been in the U.S. Senate for 12 years. That's all I'll say. Whatever else they said, like Congress needs to do that. You've been in Congress for 27 years.
Right.
You're governor for 3 years, and you were attorney general for 12 years before that. You are the government. Sorry, So the idea that the person who mastered the bureaucracy to become the mayor of LA doesn't understand how the bureaucracy works is just laughably incredulous on the face of it. But then it's also the blatant head patting condescension of these people to even trot that line out. Trump does this. Like, the Trumpian folks are all like, we're railing against the government. Like, you control the government for going on almost 2 years now. You control the government. You are the government. Stop saying that. It's condescending. But for somebody like a Karen Bass, who the only way you get that job is to master the political system of the Democratic Party and the bureaucracy. Those are two different things, and they're two different skill sets, by the way, and you got to have both to win elected office in places like California. For her to say that she doesn't understand the bureaucracy, it was like, well, if you don't, you should have resigned because you're incompetent. But yeah, it's just a bald-faced lie. But it's one of those political lies that sound really good on all the ads. But yeah, it's whether you're a Democrat or an independent or a Republican or a purple people eater, like, if you've been in elected office for more than a couple of years and you start railing against the government, I've got no patience for that, because no, you're the government. Show me what you've done or didn't do, and that forth. Because God, I just have no patience with elected officials that just blatantly lie to me at this point in my life, and nor should anybody else.
Speaking of elected officials in charge of things, let's segue into sports, but let's do that by starting the discussion of Flag Day, UFC fight on the White House lawn, coinciding with President Trump's 80th birthday. It's all going to be a spectacle, and from the two things can be true at once department, you can think that Trump is getting some things done that you like, while at the same time say that this is one of the most ridiculous uses of the White House lawn in history. Your thoughts?
Did you see the lighting rig yet? They completed it yesterday.
All I saw was a picture of the White House with something on top of it that looked a little bit like a roller coaster in the background.
So they have the 4-point crossed. If this is bad podcasting, but if you're on the video, it crosses over 4 points. One arch going this way, one arch going across the top of it. That's the lighting rig for this thing. That's the backdrop. It's higher than the White House. This is so ridiculous. My running line on this is like, bread and circus only works when bread isn't, at inflationary prices. The problem, here we go again with money. The UFC, TKO, which is now combined with the WWE into one giant company. Let's get into the business of this for just a second. WWE and TKO are now one big company. The UFC specifically, of course, is a multi-billion-dollar company. It's highly popular in the sports world because it grabs the well, it used to be the 25 to 45 demographic, but everybody needs more money, so now we've pushed that out to 25 to 54-year-old because ad execs are weasels and so on and so forth. But anyway, the male demographic 25 to 54, UFC is huge with that demographic. That's a big advertising demographic. It's a big political demographic. The problem you're going to have with this thing is for all the popularity of the UFC, somewhere between 9 and 15% of Americans actually watch UFC, and about half of them care about it at a hardcore level enough to buy pay-per-views and things like that and really keep up with the sport. That's a bad ratio. You know, you don't want a 90-10 ratio going the wrong way when you put something on the front lawn of the White House. I think this is going to backfire in a lot of ways because, especially when you put in the economic stuff, you know, the Trump people will just eat this stuff up because they eat everything up. This one's going to be so over the top, and the 250 anniversary stuff is going to be so over the top. And it's just they're going to have the American stuff on it, but it's going to be Trump all the time. There's going to be a lot of pushback and backlash on this, and not just from the normal people that, you know, their business model is hate Trump all the time for clicks and glory and monetize it, which I think is unhealthy, is just as unhealthy as Trump never does anything wrong. I think that's very unhealthy. It's a bad business model too, but we'll talk about that some other time. This UFC thing where the White House is a backdrop to combat sports, which I like, by the way. I've been watching UFC before it was UFC. I remember when we did the, you know, sumo wrestlers versus the Gracie stuff. So I've been there a while. I like this stuff. This is going to be way too over the top. It's going to be extremely tone deaf. The White House being a background for this thing is not going to look good. Then people who don't know who Dana White is and don't know who the UFC is and don't know who some of these people are going to look into that, and there's plenty of stuff that they're probably going to find that they're not going to like. Joe Rogan is the most popular podcaster in the country. He's also a very polarizing figure. For folks that just think he's a podcaster, he's the color commentary and in many ways the face of UFC, at least audio and visual wise. He's kind of the voice and the face of UFC. He's going to be all over this, so you got to put that whole dynamic on top of everything else. And for all his popularity, he has plenty of controversial things. Somebody's probably going to show the video of Dana White slapping his wife in the bar. You know, you're going to have to deal with all that crap, and it's going to have the White House behind it, and it's going to be in the middle of the 250th January 4th celebration. Plus, President Trump is going to President Trump and put his name all over all this. That's a lot, and a lot of people are going to get turned off by it, I'm afraid. Am I going to watch the fights? Probably. Do I think it's a good use of the White House? No, I do not. Is a lot of people not going to be as, you know, stoic about it as I am, where I'm being level about it? Nope. This is going to be a firestorm on both sides of how dare you hate America by not enjoying this combat sport that people are making a lot of money off of, compared to this is a desecration of the White House and blah, 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 blah. It's going to be a whole lot of ugly. I don't think it's going to go over very well. I think it sounded a lot better 2 years ago when they planned it. Remember, they planned this as soon as Trump won. That's when they decided to do this. It sounded better then than it does now. Sometimes strategery, you got to think ahead a little bit.
Yeah. I guess, you know, I wonder what would in an alternate universe, what would be the appropriate sport to be doing in the White House? Lawn bowling? I'm not sure.
Well, we play Little League on it,
Sharks.
so there's, you know, they play the Little League game, or they used to. I don't know if Trump's been doing it. Remember, Bush used to have them do Little League games on the
Oh yeah, he
on
had
the
Bob
lawn.
Costas show up and do commentary. Yeah,
Yeah, it's not that you can't do it. Again, the and people get mad at this, but this is just the truth. There is a market in politics for the uber macho male. Let's fight about everything, grunt when we talk. You know, the UFC stereotype, which isn't fair, by the way, because UFC actually has a pretty diverse audience. They get a bad rap. They really do. UFC replaced boxing because boxing didn't know how to regulate itself. I grew up watching fights with my dad. My dad was a huge boxing fan. He doesn't, he can't stand UFC. He just doesn't understand, and that he's older now, but he just doesn't understand it. He doesn't understand why boxing went away. There's a whole generation of people that are like that, and then there's just people that don't like combat sports in general. So the people like me who like UFC and are political and do know what's going on, I'm recoiling from it. Imagine a normie who doesn't even know UFC exists other than maybe they saw an ad sometime, and now all of a sudden they're watching these guys. And I don't know if they're having female fighters or not. I think they are. I can't remember the card off the top of my head. They're going to watch these people beat the crap out of themselves in front of the White House. I don't think that's going to hit real good with the normies if there's such a thing as a normie anymore. I just don't. It fits the political brand, but the political brand is shrinking. And that demographic specifically is shrinking. And that's not the demographic that's going to decide the midterms, guys. It's not. It's going to be Hispanics whose Trump's losing in droves. It's going to be educated women. It's going to be, the minority, like the usual suspects. And most of those demographics have a real mixed bag when it comes to UFC. Is it going to help? No. Is it going to hurt? Probably. That's probably a good reason to not do it, but they're going to do it because of the spectacle.
Yeah, it's got the potential for cringe factor. 10 out of 10. So speaking of sports, I wrote down NBA versus NHL because I wanted to get your take on the fact that the Knicks are in the NBA Finals for the first time in 27 years.
I hadn't noticed. Knicks fans are so subtle about it. I didn't know they were doing what. God, they're insufferable. I love you, New York, but good Lord.
Well, but actually, let's talk about that for a second, because part of the thing that the NBA has been missing for a while has been that. So you've got the Knicks coming in to the NBA Finals on a serious roll. They've won their last 12 games. It's some crazy number of games.
Yeah.
10 games, I think.
It's an all-time playoff run that they are on.
Yeah, and they're 12-2 in the playoffs. They won their last, I believe, 10 games. But you've got the attitude that, in all candor, Oklahoma City didn't bring, Denver didn't bring, Giannis didn't bring. You got to go back to maybe any of the times that LeBron was with the Heat. You'd be like, okay, well, I'm not sure I totally like these guys together.
Yeah.
I don't care for LeBron. Yep. I guess my argument is maybe we need that.
You need a bad guy, and it's not that the Knicks are trying to be bad guys. It's just they're so over the top, and Knicks fans are so annoying. Again, I'm saying it in jest and love. Like, I love you guys. My kid's moving to New York in 2 months. I don't hate New York. Knicks fans are obnoxious, and they're unbearable when they're losing, and they're worse when they're winning. But as much as we're joking about it, in basketball, the sport of basketball, which I love, played basketball in high school. I love basketball. The Garden still matters. Just go look, because the biggest names, the Jordans, even today, the Stars, they want to have that big game in the Garden. That still matters. That still means something. New York is always going to matter. And the fact that, James Dolan is such an incompetent dolt that he ran the franchise into the ground until he went and blew all this money on the Sphere so that people that actually know how to run a basketball team put this particular team together. Please, James Dolan, go build something somewhere else. Let the Knicks be good, because it's good for everybody. I beg you, sir. Put that in Maryland. Ruin Maryland's financial situation with the Sphere. Do it, sir. Do it. I applaud you, sir. We got to do an episode on the Sphere sometime. I've got so many thoughts on the Sphere. But the Knicks really matter. And the fact that they're good, the Carmelo Anthony branch, really, you go back to like the Starks Oakley Knicks that I remember real well, and the wars with Jordan. They gave the Jordan teams just hell.
Yeah,
it was so compelling. Like that's a foundational sports memory for me. And it wasn't basketball; it was rugby, man. It was brutal. Like because they couldn't shoot for nothing, they just beat the crap out of you. And it was that kind of stuff. So it's been a long time since they've had that excitement. Having the NBA Finals in New York City is going to be cool to watch. It's going to play. It's going to drive ratings. you got to have a bad guy. And the New York Knicks outside of New York, when they're good, is always going to be a bad guy to most of the rest of the country just by default. And it's not because they're bad. This is a great team. Deuce McBride, who's a WVU guy that I love, is one of their key bench guys. So it's nothing again. It's just who they are. New York teams are not liked by the rest of the country, and New York is fine with that. You got to have the heel to part of the problem with the NBA playoffs and the finals is a lot of the finals have just been, vanilla good guy versus vanilla good guy. It's not like they're not exceptional basketball players, but SGA doesn't have a whole lot of a personality outside of his flopping. He's a tremendous player. I wish he'd quit doing the flopping, but he's a flopper. That's why Wemby's such a big deal, because Wemby embraces it. He has no problem going to the magazines like, yeah, I'm ticked I didn't get the MVP. I want 10 of them. Oh, please do that more. We need we need, even though he's
kicked out.
Yeah, even though he's French, there's a clip about Wemby. If you want to understand Wemby, there's a clip that I heard about years ago when they did the draft. They said there's this clip where they lost, I think it was like the European Youth League or the European Cup or what. It was one of these big tournaments before he got drafted. A couple thousand people there, nobody from America paid a lick of attention. And they lose, and he fouled out, and he's behind the bench. It's like the baseball guy slinging stuff around. He didn't destroy anything, but he's just doing that pacing walk of mad. And I'm like, and when you go back and watch it now, you're like, okay, he's built for this. He cared that much about that. So and I still worry about, man, that body just defies physics. So I worry about it because you're just not what did the sports science, when he falls, it's a 14-foot fall if he's jumping because of his height. The equivalent of falling 14 feet, just him falling on a rebound or something. You worry about the body, but God, that's why he's so important, because if the Spurs start ripping a couple off, which it looks like is probably going to happen, they're going to be a bad guy team to everybody that doesn't like the Spurs, and Wemby's fine with it because he'll go to the podium and go like, yeah, I'm the best player in the world. I want to get all the MVP, and not in an arrogant way, just matter of fact, like I want to win all the trophy, which was his, it's not verbatim, but he's going, they asked him about it and he didn't say it, but he just said, I want to win all the trophies I can win. Boy, you need that in basketball. So if you can get that against the Knicks for a couple of years, or you can get, Oklahoma City is a great basketball team. They're a little hard to watch because of their style and the flopping and all that. But this is good for basketball, and especially basketball that's got an image problem because of all the AAU stuff and the ickiness. The NIL is actually making college basketball watchable again, so you're getting better quality. I think the NBA could be on an uptick if they could tighten up they need to tighten the rules up and cut down on the threes. They need to do something about the flopping. But does the Knicks being really good really matter for the NBA that's really the NFL's eating their lunch right now culturally?
Yeah.
The NFL schedule just came out. They're doing Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, day after Christmas. They're just chewing up the NBA's prime real estate. Does the NBA need the Knicks to be good? 100%. Am I going to be annoyed and root against the Knicks to ever win anything? 100%. Is that good for the game of basketball? 100%.
NHL, does that register at all?
The NHL's problem has always been is it's a superior in-person product to what it is on television. The NHL, hockey in general, minor league hockey, hockey in person is one of the great sporting things you can ever go to. It doesn't translate to TV super well. That's always been the problem. Good.
But
yeah,
to that end, it has vastly improved on TV thanks to high definition television,
100%.
Just the aspect ratio. But where I was going with the NHL questioning was, I guess a couple of angles. Number one is that the best teams in the regular season are not making it to the finals. The Avalanche got bumped by Vegas. There's a possibility that Carolina versus Montreal might yield Montreal, but we're gonna have Montreal would probably bring a decent amount of the original six type fans who
Yeah,
are
yeah,
like,
yeah.
okay, well, I could live with a Canadian
It's
team
been a
winning.
lot, boy. It's been a long time since Canada's been in the cup and had an honest shot at it. Um, Montreal specifically, if they're there, you're gonna have every TV in Canada on that. It's gonna be that big of a deal.
Were it to happen, but Vegas is still kind of this. I guess the thing we need to root for is Montreal against Vegas because you've got old guard versus new glitzy franchise that they've done a great job with branding. It's a really sharp visual look and all of that fun stuff. But I guess, do we want to root against Vegas? I guess what the NHL probably needs to have happen for just for eyeballs' sake, and it's been exciting postseason that I've watched. But what the NHL needs to happen for eyeballs' sake is that it's Montreal against Vegas, so that we can have maybe
Yeah,
the
it does.
possibility of some sort of interest. Because Carolina, they have a hockey team. I mean, I saw
They have
something
a good
on
hockey
on
team. They've got a cup. Like they've won the cup
I
before. Yeah.
understand. I understand. I saw something making the rounds on Twitter where somebody was claiming the economy is so bad here in the U.S. that I can't even fly to Charlotte to go see the Carolina games. It's like, okay,
Well,
it's not in Charlotte, but sure, okay.
RDU is one of the best airports in the country, and I use it frequently, so I'll defend RDU a little bit. Charlotte routed my kid from Rome through JFK because TSA wanted to go home at 7 p.m. and she ended up delayed 8 hours. So don't get me started on Charlotte Douglas Airport right now because I'm still a little upset. Um, yeah, what's look? I work with a Canadian, the News Forum up in Canada, and one of the national news networks up there, and I'm a contributor to them. And they're Toronto based, and they're a bunch of Toronto fans. They're hating this Montreal thing. It's one of those running joke things, right? Because I was kidding them about America winning the World Hockey Cup, and I was kidding about beating them in the Olympics. I've just been really laying it to them, like, yeah, 35 years you haven't had the Stanley Cup, whatever the number is. Like, it's one of my running jokes when I'm waiting to get on air with them. I always make fun of them about hockey. So they're letting me have it about Montreal maybe getting there, and I'm like, wait a minute, you're Toronto, you hate Montreal. They're like, yeah, but we're going to take it just to shut you people up. I'm like, okay. The Montreal thing is going to be massive for Canada, and it's 25 million people, and 20 million of them will probably watch it if literally, like, it's going to be doing amazing. And remember, our rating system doesn't count Canada, which is one of a bone of contention for NHL when they're trying to do their media deals and stuff. Let's take a step back for a second. Vegas has a really good hockey team. Just let that sit for a second, just as wording. Las Vegas has a great hockey team. That's how amazing American sports is. We put a hockey team in the desert and it immediately does get. Tampa Bay's been reeling off cups. It's just amazing. I think you're 100% right. I think the NHL needs to be smart. Remember, they got hurt when they overexpanded, and it took them a long time to kind of recover from that. And then they had some bad management decisions. They had a bad media deal. They need to be careful and understand that they're always going to be fifth place. It's always going to be, NFL, basketball, baseball, and then college football, and then them in that order. But they have openings here to really get on a good run because you have excellent American teams in really important markets. And the thing about Vegas people have to understand is Vegas is also the secondary LA market, basically. Like, I lived in Vegas. Vegas is a Lakers Raiders town. That's why removing the Raiders there made difference because everybody in Vegas was already a Raiders fan anyway. The Lakers are the most popular basketball team. Even if they put an expansion team in there, the Lakers are going to. It's a Lakers town. So it's more than just Vegas. It's LA East. It's SoCal East in a lot of ways. If you get that matchup, it's something they can market. But then there's what you just talked about is I think the NHL, and I'm not a hockey expert, but just as a fan that's watched it from the Red Wing Yzerman days when I really fell in love with watching hockey. They've got a bit of a balance problem where they're going to need some of those stalwart teams to be consistently good. So it's great that Montreal came back, but Montreal and Toronto need to be consistently good. Detroit and Chicago need to be consistently good because all due respect to Tampa and Carolina, which I should pull forward because they're close, but I don't because I still like my Red Wings. Those franchise, you talked about the first six, those franchises have to be consistently good. It's not like the NBA where the best player can be in San Antonio and it still works, and it's not the NFL where the best player can be in Kansas City and it still works. They need stars in the big cities to make it work and to keep it going consistently. So they've got some infrastructure things that could shore them up. And I think they've made really, really smart moves the last couple of years. And I think you're seeing the fruit of that in some really good playoffs that, although they're unexpected, if you can get a Montreal Vegas final, I think they're going to be pleased as punch.
And I think that'll have to be the last word, because I know you've got more media all the time. At Andrew Donaldson, I appreciate your time today. We covered the news of the day, a wide range of topics, and I'm sure there will be a couple of comments on YouTube about how wrong we both are. So
we'll come back and do a show answering those comments. That's the great thing about content. It just content beget. It's like Leviticus in the Bible. Content begot content, begot content, begot content. We'll keep doing it, buddy, and I appreciate your time. And I will talk hockey over national politics any day, even though I know way more about the first than I do the latter. But that's the gig, my friend, and I appreciate you. And you're doing a good job with the show, by the way.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yes,
Thanks
sir. Anytime.
as always, and good luck the balance of May.
It's gonna be long.